Matthew chapter 24, verse 19. And woe unto them that are with child, and to them that give suck in those days. But I pray ye that your flight be not in the winter, neither on the Sabbath day. For then shall be great tribulation, such as was not since the beginning of the world to this time, no, nor ever shall be. For except those days be shortened, there should no flesh be saved. But for the elect's sake, those days shall be shortened.
Peggy 18.
In 2001, a real-world exercise tested the emergency response to a bioterror attack on the continental United States. The operation was called Dark Winter. Within just a few days, the simulation spiraled out of control. The operation predicted a rapid breakdown in essential institutions, civil disorder, and massive civilian casualties. Dark Winter has revealed how vulnerable we've become. Our lifestyle, our security, our safety depends on a delicate and unstable economy. We've created a system so complicated that we no longer understand how to control it. Oil, power, shipping, transport. We live in a complex world. And the more complex it gets, the more fragile it becomes. The system is built on a global supply chain that gets things where they're needed, just in time. We've created a house of cards. Remove just one, and everything falls apart. And what's fueling this system?
Money. Americans can spend $90 billion in a single day of shopping. Last year, 200 million people swarmed their local stores on November 23rd. We call that day Black Friday. Did you know that a flu virus can survive on the surface of a banknote for up to 17 days? One day there will be a pandemic. It could begin during the crush of Black Friday sales. A pathogen will jump from tainted banknotes to human skin, onto food, toys, children, and loved ones. By the time patient zero feels the first sore throat, millions of people will already be infected. From this point, the breakdown will happen fast.
To me, when I asked you, I said, what is happening with the supply chain?
Sure. So the biggest thing to understand is supply chain is a system. And there are a lot of different components to it. And it really starts with forecasting and ordering what you think. So as a manufacturer, I have to forecast what my future needs of automobiles will be. I place that manufacturing order, and let's say something that's being produced overseas. It gets produced, it gets shipped, it gets processed at the port, it then gets transported, whether it gets trucked to the ultimate place of sale or a warehouse, or it gets moved into a rail yard and then it gets railed, and eventually it gets sold. So the challenge is when the supply chain breaks down, all of that has to operate in sync. If you concentrate, as we are today, on just the port operations, you're just going to move that supply chain problem further down the road.
Because let's just, and I'm sure it doesn't work this way, but let's just say you have shipment of a whole bunch of steering wheels coming in. Well, what are you going to do with all the steering wheels? Because you're missing the chips because the chips aren't in. Right. You need all of them to come in an ordered way, right?
Right.
And can you explain how sophisticated the supply chain is for factories like Toyota?
Yeah. Well, so literally the Japanese kind of invented just in time. And just in time means when I build a vehicle in my plant, literally the part that goes on that truck may only arrive hours before production. In fact, our plant here in Texas that builds the Tundra, we actually have suppliers on site, the seat supplier. So they will build their seats in the same sequence that I build my vehicle. So that seat literally arrives maybe 20 minutes before it needs to be able to go down that line. And I think the biggest thing as a result of all this, lean manufacturing was created to take waste out of the system. So you didn't have to warehouse 30 and 60 days worth of parts.
Because when you were at Ford, this is many years ago, almost 40 years ago, when you were at Ford, you told me that there were times when you ran out of the right color seats, but that was just it.
That's right. You put in whatever you had at the end of the year. So the world's gotten away from that. But the big question that COVID and the supply chain crisis has created is, can lean manufacturing as we know it today, just in time, literally hours before it's needed, is that the best way to go? Or are we going
Call hello Yahweh Ba'Shem Yahweh Shah Ba'Shem Rakah Kudash. I want to send double honors to the apostles and elders of Great Millstone. Much peace, love, and salutations to Yakim out there pushing the word in sincerity and truth. This is Brother Ariella. Dark winter is coming. The dark winter is coming. And we see the first parts of the breakdown of famine and supply shortages happening with the bottlenecking of shipping and container offloading to different countries all across the world. Right now it's happening majorly here in Babylon the Great, which is America. And people really are still moving around like it's all good. And that's why the tribulation that's yet to come, is going to be a thief in the night to most people. When you read here in the book of Matthew, the 24th chapter, 36th verse, it says, "But of that day and hour knoweth no man, no, not the angels of heaven, but my Father only. But as the days of Noah were, so shall also the coming of the Son of Man be. For as in the days that were before the flood, they were eating and drinking, marrying and giving in marriage, until the day that Noah entered into the ark, and knew not until the flood came and took them all away, so shall also the coming of the Son of Man be." And this is the things, the scripture says that the elect were going to be given heed or warning with the beginning of sorrows, to look for these things and to understand, for the beginning of sorrows, all right? And so we're starting to see the tremors of that effect happen, We're starting to see the tremors of that effect happen. Here in 2nd Ezra, the 6th chapter, in the 22nd verse, it says, "And suddenly shall the sown places appear unsown, and the full storehouses shall suddenly be found empty. And the trumpet shall give a sound, which when every man heareth, they shall be suddenly afraid. At that time shall friends fight one against another like enemies, and the earth shall stand in fear with those that dwell therein. The spring of the fountain shall stand still, and in 3 hours they shall not run." And so we're going to start to see, as more and more strain happens, calamities come. Now, I played at the beginning of this clip from this game called The Division by Tom Clancy, where they're highlighting executive a drill that was done back in 2001 called Dark Winter. Along with Dark Winter, there was something, I think it was called Executive 51 or something like that, where they kind of outline certain events, that course of action that could potentially happen when famine hits. And so I'm going to play the rest of this because it's highlighting day 1, day 2, day 3. And the quickness of it doesn't matter, but the how it all comes together makes sense.
Hospitals will reach capacity. Panic will strike. Day 2, quarantine zones will be established. Resources will be rationed. Transport will go into lockdown. Day 3, international trade will stop. The oil will dry up. The stock market will collapse. Day 4, the power will fail. The shelves will be empty. The taps will run dry. And once hunger and despair take hold, people will do anything for survival. By day 5, everyone will be a potential threat.
In 2007, a new presidential directive was signed quietly into law.
Now, these directives that they're mentioning on this video game is actually real. It's not like they make that up. This is the actual real directive.
This maps out the government's response to a crisis, a plan to cope with a real dark winter. It is known as Directive 51. There are rumors of shadow agencies, sleeper cells, covert agents, but nothing can be confirmed.
Our complex world is primed for breakdown.
And once the chaos strikes,
There won't be resources to save us all.
the only question left is, what will it take to save what remains?
It's going to take Yahweh Shah returning. Now, this is what we're seeing, man. We're seeing all of these shortages start to come to fruition, and we're seeing the breakdown of energy. Biden artificially shutting down pipelines. He's making bad deals with OPEC. OPEC is kind of rescinding on some of the deals, and so we have an energy crisis that's happening across Europe, across the West, which is as everybody's noticed the spike in energy prices. So these things are being kind of artificially put in place so that they can push on you the MOTB.
Side effects of the pandemic are wreaking havoc on the global supply chain. American consumers are buying up products faster than suppliers can ship them. A recent article in The Atlantic examines the root causes of this so-called everything shortage, and it comes right before the holiday season. And the author of that piece, Derek Thompson, joins us now to discuss the country's crowded ports and emptying shelves. Derek, good to see you, my friend.
Good to be back. Thank you.
So explain the hydra of bottlenecks, that's what you called it, that are contributing to the everything shortage in America right now.
So before you get to the hydra of bottlenecks, you have this enormous amount of demand that's coming from the U.S. economy. And it's demand for hard goods, electronics, stuff that tends to be made in Vietnam, Malaysia, China. So we're trying to pull all this thing in from the supply chain. And the supply chain... Excuse me? Sorry, what did you say?
No, continue.
Oh, that's right. So basically, we're trying to pull in all this stuff from the supply chain, and we're not being able to do so. And so fundamentally, the problem here is that the demand is outstripping our capacity to pull all of these goods through the supply that we have. So what is that supply? Well, we have container ships that are bobbing off the coast of Los Angeles and Long Beach. We have trains that are backed up because you have all these containers in the Pacific Ocean. In addition to the rail that's backed up, we have a shortage of truckers, a 60,000 trucker shortage in the United States that pre-existed the pandemic but is now being exacerbated by it. And the way that's cashing out for consumers, or not cashing out for them, is exactly what you can see on the screen. You see that you go to your Walgreens and your CVS's, your pharmacies, your Walmarts, and the shelves are empty because all this stuff is stuck upstream. So it's two problems: lots of demand, and that's not entirely a bad thing, and not enough supply to meet that demand.
So when you have tons of demand and you have a short supply, what happens to prices? Natural economics tells you that the price goes up. And so you're going to start to see increased inflation across many sectors. All right, as there's that bottleneck, and as these retail companies have a strain or have to increase how much they pay to get the supply, that fee is going to be transferred to the consumer. Natural economics. Okay.
If you're preparing for Thanksgiving, you may want to get your orders in now because the holiday birds, well, they're not flying to store shelves as quickly as they have in the past. Now, you've already heard how pandemic supply issues and transportation issues have affected many industries. Well, you may see far fewer turkeys at Thanksgiving parties this year.
This year we opened a little early because we can't get a hold of all the turkeys we usually do every year. Getting near to about half to almost 3/4 of my standard order. Really? Yeah, with also I'm experiencing price raises.
Now, turkey isn't the only holiday meat that's hard to find right now. Some stores also report a shortage of ham. But don't fret just yet. Some retailers say turkeys are still coming in, they're just coming in slower.
That's still famine. Still famine.
Right now, the UK is presenting different options as far as rationing food and meat. And what they do, that I get a kick out of, is they start to bring celebrities out to have them make suggestions. And Joanna Lumley is an actress that was on a TV show called Absolutely Fabulous. And we got glimpses of it here in the United States. It was funny. It was basically two yentas that were out that overdrink and, flirt with men and just, hijinks ensue. But anyways, the show was pretty funny. I mean, I never watched it a lot, but I saw enough of it to understand it. And, she's a decent actress. But anyways, her whole thing is that we need to get back to a wartime rationing of meat and supplies right now. In other words, you would get a point system, which is ridiculous. You get so many points, you'd be able to get a chicken, you'd be able to get vegetables, milk, and things like that. And I personally think that this.
At certain places, they already are rationing meat. You go into certain meat markets, you can't get as much as you want. You're limited to getting just a few packs of meat. You're limited to just getting a few packs of certain items. They're already starting to roll out rationing. And they're pushing this, and they've been pushing this at the World Economic Forum, to where you won't eat that much meat anymore. You know, a social credit system that's going to monitor your consumption in conjunction with how much CO2 that it puts out. All of those things are being prepared. All those things are getting ready to be rolled out. All a part of the MOTB systems. A dark winter is upon us.
This is horrible, okay? And again, guys, the discussion of this in the UK and here in the United States, it's been presented as well. I would really, really, really recommend that you guys go out and stock up on whatever you can right now, because when the health crisis started, they did limit supplies of toilet paper and certain food and milk and eggs and things like that. I saw it. And, I've told this story to my friends a bunch of times. And there's a store here in Southern California called Grocery Outlet. Grocery Outlet is a discount type chain. It's kind of a mini warehouse type store where you get deals on stuff, and they have certain discounted items and things like that. But they sell, bread, milk, meat, vegetables, aspirin, a little bit of everything, and alcohol. It's just a nice little store chain. I shop at the local one. I see these guys a lot, people in there a lot. But there was one guy that I'd seen just a few times, in the store, and never really had a conversation with him. But one day as I'm walking in, I'm, getting my cart ready and putting it to the side. And this guy walks in behind me, and it's the guy I'd seen before. And they were like, "Hey, don't try to pull that again." As he walks in, he's like, okay. So, gets my attention. And so I'm walking through the store. I'm in the back. He's like, "Hey, come here. Can I ask you a question?" And I'm like, "What?" He goes, "Can you buy a gallon of milk for me?" And I thought he needed me to buy the milk for him. And I'm like, "Okay, you don't have money for milk?" But he had other stuff with him. He said, "No, they're only limiting me to 1 gallon of milk at a time. And there's 8 people in my family. Milk won't even last through a meal." I'm like, "Really?" Okay, I couldn't believe it. So I go, "Sure, I'll help you." So I went and bought the milk. I bought it and gave it to him. But again, the reprimand that woman gave him when he walked in was him wanting to buy 2 gallons of milk at a time for his 6 kids and his wife. Okay? So we're going to see this again, guys. You're going to see rationing of foods. You're going to see limitations put on people when it comes to buying stuff. So get it now. Now, you can't buy milk, for 2 months in advance.
We're going to see this again. We're going to see this rationing, and you would think, hey, well, no, I'll go to this store, and then I'll be able to go to that store. Well, soon they're going to be having it. Everything is going to be tagged and chipped to where they're going to be able to monitor your expenses. They're going to be able to monitor what you're buying. And so they're going to know that you bought milk at one place, and then they'll be able to limit your purchase of certain tagged items and say, okay, well, number 0045, which is underneath dairy and cheese, you've used up your credits for dairy and cheese on your account, so you can't buy anymore. This is how serious it's getting, man. You're going to be under complete control. All right. 2nd Ezra chapter 16, verse 19. Behold, start up verse 17. It says, woe is me, who will deliver me in those days, the beginning of sorrows and great mournings, the beginning of famine and great death, the beginning of wars, and the power shall stand in fear, the beginning of evils. What shall I do when these evils shall come? Behold, famine and plague, tribulation and anguish are sent as scourges for a minute. But for all these things they shall not turn from their wickedness, nor be always mindful of the scourges. Behold, victual shall be so cheap upon earth, that they shall think themselves to be in good case, and even Then shall evils grow upon earth, sword, famine, and great confusion. So as people continue to live on and carry on their day-to-day monotonous Babylonian lifestyle, these problems are going to be looming in the background. And this is how it's a thief in the night, right? It says, for many of them that dwell upon earth shall perish of famine, and the other that escape the hunger shall the sword destroy. Why? Because when famine happens, people move into absolute chaos. People move into survival mode. People go into beast-like nature. Okay, and so this is where you're going to be seeing the opening credit scene that I played of the Tom Clancy talked about this. When the money stops and the trucks stop, people go into that calamity or perplexity mode, man. And this is where it starts to get, more and more trouble starts to increase out here. And we're already starting to see everything clamping down. Everything's starting to clamp down. Now, this lady here, Tommy Bites Homestead, she went to the store. This is October 9th, pick up some things just to highlight.
Gave them life, and they're still here with their family and with you to share their knowledge. So as you can see, first things first, walking in, produce. It didn't look that great. The items that they did have there, they looked a little picked over, honestly. And then as we went through the store, as I always say, you start noticing more gaps, more empty shelves, more bare shelves, just food shortages, and noticing how they're rearranging the store and item placement and where they're putting items at now as opposed to where they used to have them, just to make it look like the store is, having the deliveries that they need.
So what do you think what happens when during the holiday rush, when people are all in these stores trying to get the last minute meals and stuff for their families? What do you think happens when there's an announcement that, hey, certain items are just not going to be able to be available for a long period of time? What do you think happens when you start to go to fast food restaurants and there are certain things on the menu that are just not even available? You can't get that chicken sandwich, player. We don't have it. We don't have this. We don't have that. And it starts to get more and more and more clamped down on the things that you want, man. When you go and you read about famine in the ancient world, when these type of things happened, it wasn't a good look. So this warning of famine and peril that the scriptures talk about, we're starting to see the rumblings of it. Dark winter truly is upon us. Now, when you go to the book of Josephus, and you go to the 6th book, right? You go into the book 6, the destruction of Jerusalem, right? And you skip on down to chapter 3, and you kind of read about the famine that happened in Messiah here. You get a glimpse of how serious things got. I'm going to read through these 2 paragraphs. I'm going to read fairly quickly. But imagine this type of situation in major cities across the United States and across the West in general. Part 3 says, now those that perished by famine in the city, the number was prodigious, and the miseries that underwent were unspeakable. For if so much as the shadow of any kind of food did anywhere appear, a war was commenced presently, and the dearest friends fell a fighting one with another about it, snatching from each other the most miserable supports of life. Nor would men believe that those who were dying had no food. But the robbers would search them when they were expiring, lest anyone should have concealed food in their bosoms and counterfeited dying. Nay, these robbers gaped for one and ran about stumbling and staggering along like mad dogs and reeling against the doors of the house like drunken men. They would also, in the great distress they were in, rush into every very same houses 2 or 3 times in one and the same day. Moreover, their hunger was so intolerable that it obliged them to chew everything, while they gathered such things as the most sordid animals would not touch. They endured and endured to eat them, nor did they laugh at abstain from girdles and shoes. And the very leather which belonged to their shields they pulled off and gnawed. The very swips of old hay became food to some, and some gathered up fibers and sold a very small weight of them for 4 drachma. But why do I describe the shameless impudence that the famine brought on men in their eating inanimate things, while I am going to relate a matter of fact like to which no history relates, either among the Greeks or barbarians? It is horrible to speak of it, and incredible when I heard. I had indeed willingly omitted this calamity of ours, and I might not seem to deliver what is so portentous to prosperity, but that I have innumerable witnesses to it in my own age. Besides, my country would have had little reason to thank me for suppressing the miseries that she underwent at this time. Now he's about to tell this story. So imagine, we read about this in Second Ezra, the state of how things can get when people are hungry. When people are hungry, they'll become madmen. They'll they'll run up into any house, man. They'll do whatever they need to do. Okay. When you read about these things, you go to 2nd Ezra 15, 2nd Ezra 16. You see how things can get. Okay. No one cares. 2nd Ezra 15 verse 15 says verse 14 says, "Woe to the world and them that dwell therein, for the sword and their destruction draweth nigh, and one people shall stand up to fight against another, and swords in their hands. For there shall be sedition among men, and invading one another. They shall not regard their king nor princes, in the course of their actions shall stand in their power. A man shall desire to go in a city, and shall not be able. For because of their pride, the city shall be troubled, the houses shall be destroyed, and men shall be afraid. A man shall have no pity upon his neighbor, but shall destroy their houses with the sword, and spoil their goods because of the lack of bread, and for great tribulation." These are the things that are going to be going down whenever things get strained out. And it's not going to be a good look for women in that time, man. Pride that women have when it's going down like this, you ain't going to be all Miss Independent in that day. It's going to be real bad out here. So it's needful for you to come under the umbrella of Yahweh Shem Yahushua and get in order. Now, part 4 says, "There was a certain woman that dwelt beyond Jordan. Her name was Mary. Her father was Eleazar, in the village of Bethzad, which signifies the house of hyssop. She was eminent for her family and her wealth, and had fled away to Jerusalem with the rest of the multitude, and was with them besieged therein at this time. The other effects of this woman had been already seized upon, right? Such, as she had brought with her out of Perea and removed to the city. What she had treasured up besides, as also what food she had contrived to save, had been also carried off by the rapacious guards, who came every day running into her house for that purpose. This put the poor woman into a very great passion, and by the frequent reproaches and imprecations she eased at the rapacious villains, right? She had provoked them to anger against her, but none of them, either out of the indignation she had raised against herself, or out of commiseration of her case, would take away her life. And if she found any food, she perceived her labors were for others and not for herself. It was now become impossible for any way to find any more food, while the famine pierced through her very bowels and marrow. When also her passion was fired to a degree beyond the famine itself, nor did she consult with anything but with her passion and the necessity she was in. She then attempted a most unnatural thing, and snatching up her son, who was a child sucking at her breast, she said, "O thou miserable infant, for whom shall I preserve thee in this war, this famine, and this sedition? As to the war with the Romans, if they preserve our lives, we must be slaves. This famine also will destroy us, even before that slavery comes upon us. Yet are these seditious rogues more terrible than both the other. Come on, be thou my food, and be thou a fury to these seditious virulence, and a byword to the world, which is all that is now wanting to complete the calamities of the Jews. As soon as she had said this, she slew her son, and then roasted him, and eat the one half of him, and kept the other half by her concealed. Upon this, the seditious came in presently, and smelling the horrid scent of this food, they threatened her that they would cut her throat immediately if she did not show them what food she had gotten ready. She replied that she had saved a very fine portion of it for them, and withal uncovered what was left of her son. Whereupon they were seized with a horror and amazement of mind, and stood astonished at the sight. Then she said to them, This is mine own son, and what hath been done with mine own doing? Come, eat of this food, for I have eaten of it myself. Do not you pretend to be either more tender than a woman or more compassionate than a mother. But if you be so scrupulous and do abominate this my sacrifice, as I have eaten the one half, let the rest be reserved for me also. After which those men went out trembling, being never so much affrighted at anything as they were at this, and with some difficulty they left the rest of their meat to the mother. Upon which the whole city was full of the horrid action immediately, and while everybody laid this miserable case before their own eyes, they trembled as if this unheard action had been done by themselves. So those that were thus distressed by the famine were very desirous to die, and those already dead were esteemed happy, because they had not lived long enough either to hear or to see such miseries. So the point is, because of men pillaging, coming in, coming out, people taking stuff, the famine is causing all this freaking chaos, calamity, and terror. This woman killed her own son, man. Ate half of them. They ate the other half. Okay? During the times of desperation, the mind, if it's fixed on this earth, will do anything. It will justify anything, man. All right? That's why it says, woe to those who give suck in those days, and pray that your flight be not in the winter. Isaiah 32:9 says, Rise up, you women that are at ease. Hear my voice, you careless daughters. Give ear to my speech. Many days and years shall ye be troubled, ye careless women, for the vintage shall fail. The gathering shall not come. All right? And that vintage is talking about food shortages. Tremble, ye women that are at ease. Be troubled, ye careless ones. Strip you and make you bare, and gird sackcloth upon your loins. They shall lament for the teats, for the pleasant fields, for the fruitful vine. All right? Upon the land my people shall come up thorns and briars, yea, upon all the houses of joy and in the joyous city. All right? Because the palaces shall be forsaken, the multitude of the city shall be left. The forts and towers shall be for dens forever, a joy of wild asses, a pasture of flocks. Okay? And this is what's happening, man. All right? As things continue to ramp up more and more and more and more, we're going to see these type of calamities and perplexities, right? Right? Luke 21:25, there shall be signs in the sun and in the moon and in the stars, and upon the earth distress of nations with perplexity, and the sea and waves roarings, men's hearts failing them for fear, and for looking after those things which are the coming on the earth, for the powers of heaven shall be shaken. All right? And we always go into that word perplexity. It goes into resources. Resources are going to be cut off amazingly. They're going to be cut off amazingly, man. When you look this up, a pareo, right? To be without resources, to be in straits, to be left wanting, to be embarrassed, to be in doubt, to not know which way to turn. That type of distress is coming. Okay? And it's not going to be a good look, man. Men are going to be afraid. Women are going to be extremely vulnerable. A dark winter is coming, man. Isaiah chapter 13, verse 12. Well, let's start up. Verse 11 says, "And I will punish the world for their evil and the wicked for their iniquity, and I will cause the arrogancy of the proud to cease, and I will lay low the haughtiness of the terrible. I will make a man more precious than fine gold, even a man with the golden wedge of Ophir." All right? "Therefore I will shake the heavens, and the earth shall remove out of her place in the wrath of the Lord of hosts, and in the day of his fierce anger. And it shall be as a chased roe, and as a sheep that no man taketh up. They shall every man turn to his own people, and flee everyone to his own land. Everyone that is found shall be thrust through, and everyone that is joined unto them shall fall by the sword. And their children shall be dashed to pieces before their eyes, and their houses shall be spoiled, and their wives ravished." All right. So when chaos hits these streets, man, people are going. Well, we have these times where there's food shortages, there's blackouts because of extreme cold, the electricity grid is failing, gas prices and natural gas and oil prices are through the roof. So much demand for lumber and wood is going to go through the roof. People that don't really make that much money are going to be strained out for getting resources. Well, what are you going to think they're going to do? They're going to go take it. We're not that far off from that type of stuff, man. All right? Amos chapter 5, verse 17. "And all vineyards shall be wailing, for I will pass through thee, saith the Lord. Woe unto you that desire the day of the Lord. To what end is it for you? The day of the Lord is darkness and not light. As if a man did flee from a lion, and a bear met him. Or he went into a house, and leaned his hand upon a wall, and a serpent bit him. Shall not the day of the Lord be darkness and not light? Even very dark, and no brightness in it." A dark winter is coming. Dark times are coming because of the wickedness that's plagued the earth. The Most High is going to send judgment. He does that by taking up his resources, taking up what's supposed to be Eden and plenteousness and food and life and abundance. He takes it away for judgment. And people start to scourge on one another. So we're looking at those times getting ready to befall not only just Babylon the Great, but the rest of the world, man. So I wanted to highlight that, man, and talk about it. Kol halal Yahweh Bahashim Yahweh Shah Bahashim Rakah Kodash. Double honors once again to the apostles and the elders of Great Millstone. Much peace, love, and salutations to y'all. Came out pushing the word in sincerity and truth. Get your mind right. Stay under the name of the Lord. That's a strong tower. Shalom.